bobcat's usually distrustful. Alba stared at the fluffy creature with the pointy ear, short tail and soft paws. I don't know, I've never seen one before, someone said they were hard to find, Dew replied, his head tingling and alert. They're just cats, but big, Avery stated, glancing at Alba's frightened but interested face before kneeling down. Are you going to touch that thing? What if it bites? It has big teeth, right? Oh, please be careful, the princess whined. Dew crossed his arms. Even he was surprised as the big cat stepped closer through the ankle-high snow. It being on a path and staying was strange. It coming toward 3 people who were each at least twice as tall as it was even stranger. It's not injured, is it? Dew worried, remembering several unused traps which might still wait inside the forest and the skull. Avery cocked his head. She looks fine to me. He stretched out his hand as the bobcat was in reach and it began to sniff his fingers. Out of the corner of his eyes, Dew could see Alba stepping back as if the cat would come for her at any moment. But it didn't show any interest in her. Its pinkish nose sniffed at the tip of the black-scaled wings, which lurked out underneath a white cape. Then it brushed its head against Avery's side and let him fondle the space between its fluffy ears. The hair is a little dry but still lovely, he commented with a glance back at Dew while letting the bobcat sit down in front of him. His eyes focused on the streak of almost white hair covering part of his eye and nose. Dew only noticed how hot his cheeks were when Alba let out a small giggle. His hands sunken in the long fur on the side of the bobcat's head, Avery's lips twisted into a satisfied smile. Would you like to pet it too, princess? He asked, but the amused grin disappeared. Oh, no, I cannot touch animals under any circumstances. Do your scales react badly to fur? He wondered, but the snake hybrid just responded by blinking a couple of times. The bobcat placed its head on Avery's lap and closed its eyes, enjoying the magic which only creatures with fingers possessed. The creature didn't even know how lucky it was, being loved by a person soon to cease to exist. Dew saw it as a waste of time for himself, but his partner looked so peaceful there in the snow, with an oversized cat letting him touch it even though it was a shy animal. I believe we should continue on, Alba noted as the bobcat stretched and bent its back, exposing the sharp claws in between the soft beans of its furry paws. The big yawn presented the many sharp teeth and long canines to the 3 hybrids. Are you sure, princess? Avery's voice was layered with sorrow. Alba hesitated for a moment, but still replied, I'm very certain. Father said we are to be back in half an hour before dinner to get presentable when he is to hold a last speech before the leading forces. The nearest armies are already before our city gates, ready to strike with us. Well then, a last tiny tap on the animal's nose, and he stood up. Dew watched as the light brown cat hopped back into the forest as if the command had been its own and disappeared behind piles of white and bare branches blocking the view. A cloud of white out of his mouth revealed that Avery must have silently sighed. The meeting today will be a bigger one, won't it? Frederick told me there will be 7 people in total, he recalled as they continued down the pathway, which almost lost itself with the corners of the woods due to the continuous falling of new snow. At least the cold had withdrawn to a point where Dew's feet weren't fully numb after a few minutes outside anymore. Alba nodded. It is true, but it will most likely be nothing more than a little motivational speech followed by several heartfelt goodbyes before everyone goes on their way. It's always like this, but most of them are always there the next time we meet up. Seeing the generals gives me the confidence to say that it will be the same this time as well. The higher-ups may be, but what about the soldiers who will actually have to fight? Dew pressed through his teeth. Her head sunk and the hood with the very inside slid into her face. There will be peace for a while after the whole West is taken under control, the soldier commented apathetically. So there will be enough time to rebuild the catastrophe, and perhaps they will have better morals than those in charge now. How dare you insult our honorable fighters just like this? Alba loudly lashed out at her bodyguard. As she noticed how uncivilized she had reacted, she flushed like an apple and repeated more politely, Ahem, where does that concern originate from? Avery showed himself unimpressed by the girl, who knew little of the harsh reality one was faced with in the ranks of a royal fighter. "Let's begin. My first general let me be beat up to test the durability of my scales. After a month I luckily got to change units because my bruising got too bad and disturbed His Majesty." Du's stomach twisted just at the mention. He didn't want to know. "Furthermore, it was good for me to have disguised myself as a boy during most of the time. The first time on a battlefield involving the death of civilians, your aunt taught me to find the dead woman first and tie up their legs before placing them as close as possible to the fire, where our general could watch over them." He continued as if nothing had happened. Innocently, Alba asked, "Why is that?" "Because many men see them as just another piece of meat to disturb, Princess. And they would have viewed me the same way if it wasn't for my facade and the general and Sue taking me under their protection. Not to take note that while guarding you, my health declined, and when I passed out, you commanded 2 soldiers who did not belong to my unit to help me upstairs. Let's say I did wake up upstairs, but on the ground. If it weren't for a comrade noticing in time, I would have been carried off. Now, I could go on about the unnecessary torture they inflict on civilians, the inhumane conditions war prisoners are kept under most of the time, or the simple fact that we kill actual people, but I assume my point is clear. The army consists of immoral douchebags, and I'm one of them." "When I become queen, I will forbid such acts," the princess declared confidently. Du heard Avery snort, trying to suppress laughter. "My princess, I can recall about 4 different regulations pursuing justice for the innocent just at this very moment. Please enlighten me. How do you plan on enhancing the efficiency of those? I worry not many of your men will applaud at the chance of being restricted in their perverted fantasies." "They will respect my rule, so they will respect my decision," Alba stated. Du could recognize a hint of insecurity in her tone, similar to that she had while the advisor talked to her into what he deemed to be her place as a princess. On the other side, Avery's attitude rose to a point he began to lose more and more respectful reservation towards the future leading power. He sounded as if he wanted to mock her as he wondered, "And how does my future queen plan on achieving this level of respect? I can't help but notice your judgment to have been a leading catalyst to start this war, being as blatant as you have been. His Majesty the King would have acted as neutral as always and sentenced the Swan hybrid woman to a life sentence in prison, but let her out after nothing but 2 years. It is no justice, but it is a safe route. I'm not accusing you of immorality. All I do is assuming the army to be rather unhappy about its certain diminishment." "It does sound very accusatory," Du uttered, his gaze directed towards the ground. He felt the conversation to be unnecessary. Much better to him would have been the time with the knight alone, without the princess being tied to his partner all the time, and the other way around. Du craved just those couple of hours left to be the best he could get, but instead he was walking in between the 2 hybrids on their way to view the festival preparations. The festival would only start at night. It was a waste of time. Avery's reply got him out of his thoughts. "It's nothing more than feedback. As a queen, there will be opposition, and one should be aware of it. It may take a while until it gets to the point the princess will become ruler herself. Her father's in good health, except the deteriorating eyesight, and he's a little deaf." "That fucker is blind," Du loudly interrupted him, gaining 2 sets of eyes staring at him, unsure of what to think. "Anyway," he continued, "it is just that I won't be here for much longer, and contrary to many, I would call myself a self-reflecting person. When it comes to all the bad qualities, sure. Self-reflective in a pessimistic manner," Du commented dryly, but he rammed his elbow into Du's side and replied, "It's not like you are much better." He took it as a challenge and nudged him just as hard. "But I see the problems in more people than myself." Avery shoved even harder, having him stumble out of his route. Du expected another comment against him, but there was nothing. He kept quiet, but he was smirking. It was a challenge. Avery wanted to see how far he would go this time. Not even 10 seconds after, he had him fixed on the ground, hands pushing down on his shoulders and knees on the tip of his widely spread out wings to keep him from sitting up at all costs. "You little—" Avery drew his legs closer to his own body to get them under Dew's torso before thrusting his knees against him, catapulting Dew away from him. The impact startled him for a moment. He sat up in the snow, with his lower arms supporting his upper body and slightly bent legs. He didn't have much more time to recover. The dragon's counterattack was a hug tight enough to press all of the air out of him, as well as keep his arms immobilized. Effortlessly he stood up with him still in his arms, and when he was fully on his feet, the Merling was levitating a couple of centimeters above the ground. Even though he could barely look at his partner's face so close to his body, Dew knew he was grinning from one ear to the other. The cold foundation returned back under his soles. His hood had slipped off his head. The freezing breeze creeped under his own hair, over his scalp, and through his exposed ears. But then the other one's hand went to each side of his head, holding him firmly but gently, keeping him warm. His lips left a wet mark on his forehead after flooding it with comforting warmth. And the wet mark got cold. It got so cold Dew was sure an icicle was eating itself into his skull. His hands closed around his hood and pulled it back. At the same time his face sank into Avery's chest, seeking protection from the harsh environment. He was aware he wouldn't get to do it again. He knew this might be the last time they could be like this. His hands held part of the cape while he wrapped his arms together with it around his waist, as if that could keep him by his side. "What's with your ears?" Alba asked from next to him. The marketplace had been emptied of all stalls for a space with benches on the outside and a large pile in the center of the circle, which was towering almost as high as the houses around. "They will set all of this on fire," Dew wondered, observing the jumble of wood, branches, and broken planks. The spaces in between the larger objects had been filled with hay. A stone border would be used to hinder the falling ashes from setting anyone on fire. "I believe so," Alba commented. Her gaze was fixed on the highest point of the pile, where a straw puppet was being fixed to a wooden pole by two men on a giant ladder, which looked as if they could fall over at any moment. "And what's that for?" Dew crossed his arms, skeptical of who was supposed to be sacrificially burned with everything else. "If I'm not mistaken, that represents the souls of the soldiers who burned to ashes but will rise up again like a phoenix." "Why would anyone want to be a burning chicken?" Alba choked on her own spit and proceeded to cough violently. Avery stayed as calm as always, mentioning, "Now you missed the metaphor. It's just about the myth of reincarnation." "Reincarnation is real!" The princess had caught herself again and waved her arms around, which caused several pairs of eyes to land on the small and loud figure. "Then why on earth is life supposed to matter if everything just resets? And why is your mother still here if she could literally have a whole new body which is not scarred by her experiences?" The knight questioned her. She didn't have an answer. Avery made a face before asking, "Was there something else you would want to see before we return, princess? The festivities will start at nightfall, but we have to be back by then." Alba sighed longingly while looking back at the overly large campfire. "I assume no. There's nothing to enjoy about the sight without the people, and my father will not allow me to leave the castle during the dark, especially not in the company of Sir Puff." "You will spend the whole time in the entertainment rooms, won't you?" Dew suspected, glancing at Avery. He would have to be with the princess the whole time. His partner would have to spend his last moments he could possibly share with him with a girl who didn't remember his name, who didn't fully comprehend the extent of damage being caused through that war, or how desperately the knight needed a moment of solitude. Dew, of course, had the chance to visit the two. Then they would sit around in silence, unable to talk honestly with one another because there were things the princess was not allowed to know or see of the two people under her. It was a waste. "Oh gods, I found you after all," a high-pitched voice sounded across the marketplace as a woman in thick black robes and a shawl fluttering around her neck rushed towards the group of three. At first Dew wasn't sure who Josephine was addressing, but then she practically fell into Avery's body, who barely managed to hold the weight of the two of them. With his brows pulled down and the dull eyes searching for an answer in Du's mutually confused face, Avery hesitantly began to pat Josephine's back and gently inquired to know, "What is it?" "The war!" the frantic woman cried. "The war wants to take my husband!" The knight's body shook as the woman's arms tightened exactly where the wound was. I know. It's a bad situation. Can you protect him?" Her dark hands grasped the cape near her neck, forcing the tall person to bend down. Du saw his own hand reaching for Josephine's shoulder, trying to pull her back, trying to keep her from doing harm to the already wounded soldier. But she could not be moved. She held on, her big eyes staring upwards in futile hope, her lips starting to tremble. "Josephine, it's fine. It will be okay, but you need to let go." Du talked down to her, unsure whether the woman really believed the person before her to be of use, or if she was nothing but desperate. "Please protect him. Those monsters, they want to send him. They have him killed," she sobbed loudly. A mother with a little kid on one hand and a basket in the other stopped and looked at the scene of a woman clutching onto the ropes of a tall hybrid person, begging to have her husband under someone's protection. Avery noticed no other pair of eyes except those of his companions on him. For once in public he stuttered, I fear I cannot do that." "Please, you must understand he's important to me." Her desperate whining forced itself through his ears into his brain, where it twirled together with the rising heat Du began to develop towards her. He wasn't the only one. 2 workers from the pile turned their heads toward the noise. One bent over to whisper something into the other one's ears. "There's just no way I can look out for another random night during the chaos." Josephine's scream crashed through his bones while her fist was flying against Avery's chest. "He isn't a random night." The hybrid nearly collapsed, holding his hands over his heart, gasping, "He isn't." The mad woman didn't get to lift her hand again. The Merling's claws held her firmly behind her back while pulling her steps away from the other one before her. She struggled, but then she gave up and sank into the snow in silence. He didn't let go of her until the moment her arms went numb and she bent over, laying her head on her knees. Then she cried. Du stood behind her, staring down at the cowering silhouette of a person who was going through the same situation as he himself. But she had a child and a future. Du didn't have those, not like he ever could. So he pitied the sensitive and loving creature who always had so many smiles for all those around her, who never returned what they received. Only one did, and he was supposed to die in under a month. His gaze lifted, looking at the messy snow splattered with red deep splotches. A man had grabbed Avery by the shoulder and shouted at him he should help the poor woman as the hybrid had begun to bleed from his mouth. And there he stood, hunched over and the red liquid dripping from his half-open mouth, while his bloodshot eyes stared into the abyss. The man who had grabbed him looked like a casual visitor of the marketplace. He had let go and viewed the broken body before him in terror, not knowing if it was him or the weeping woman who had caused the blood to spill. Du pushed him away, sending him stumbling backwards into the soft snow. Du didn't care. He supported the other upwards, dabbed his face with his sleeve until it was almost clean and asked, "Did the stitches loosen up? A medic is not too far from here. I can get you there." Avery looked him in the face, red collecting in the corner of his eyes until rolling down his cheek like a tear. "I'm fine," he whispered. "We can go back, but she will need someone to look for her right now. Will you be that person?" Du turned back to the woman who hadn't moved since sinking down like a small bundle of hopelessness. "I guess. You don't want my help even though you're hurting, isn't that the case?" One glance at his partner's face confirmed Du, so he sighed. "We'll meet later, I assume." "We will." He sat by the side, almost completely covered in the dark, while the reflection of the fire flickered in his eyes as if it was dancing wildly and passionately in its last moments. But he felt nothing of the warmth. It was cold on the bench all the way in the back. People before him were drinking, lifting their cups for cheers, laughing. There was music being played by 5 musicians standing and sitting on a makeshift stage before a house. Their upbeat tunes were accompanied by tone-deaf voices, trying to match the mood of quick dancing scores passing by. But Du had no eyes for them. He watched the tall man with long black hair and flowing cape elegantly leading a short girl in circles in between the other couples, swaying like waves being shoved around by a breeze unsure where to blow. His hand was gently placed on her waist, and the other one held hers to guide their well-chosen steps. She was laughing, but the sound was buried underneath that of many others living through the longest night of the year. Dew couldn't tear himself away from the hypnotizing sight. His heart threatened to burst inside his chest as he dipped her, and only his glowing face could be seen under the hundreds of nameless celebrating creatures dancing around the burning pile. So that was what it felt like, seeing your beloved choose someone who is not you, being happy with someone that is not you, because you weren't good enough, or because there was a higher might controlling you. Maybe it was happiness forced out of that person, but it still hurt so much. A smaller fire was cracking calmly in the corner of the closed-off room. The water had stopped running, and Dew didn't want to go to the well to get more. His fingers were freezing already. When he had left the second time together with Alba and Avery, he had been doing the end of his shift, and there had been no time to finish it since Alba demanded to leave immediately. The excitement of being allowed to leave even during the pitch-black night had filled her whole face, and Dew had dropped everything to go with them, so he would not be alone. But in the end he was alone on the bench, alone on the way back even among other people because the two didn't return with him, and alone in the kitchen, watching as the final drop of water fell into the dirty one below. The image of his face couldn't leave his mind. No matter what he did, how hard Dew tried, it didn't help. He wondered how the person was doing and feeling, and if this was the way he wanted to spend the last night in safety. Dew wouldn't want to be judgmental if that was the case, but he was, because now he was alone. A stinging in his finger brought him back to reality. The water was going red, and so was the knife in his hand. The gash on his finger wasn't big, just halfway across the tip. Still, the blood was pouring out as if it had been a major vessel. His mind was tied to the blade, where a drop mixed with his blood and water formed and rolled over the metal edge towards the hilt. Dew lifted it up to his height. The drop collected at the corner of the blade and grew bigger. At last it got too heavy, loosened from the deadly object and fell to the floor. He felt the cold line of metal on the soft inside of his lower arm, seemingly comforting the new heat spreading through his veins. He craved to let it out, and it poured out in tiny drops running along his arms to the tip of his fingers until falling to the ground. Dew rapidly shook his head. The drop was still hanging on the edge of the blade he held before his eyes. His arm was fine. His finger was still bleeding though. Dew put the knife next to the sink and tore off a part of the bandages wrapped around his arms to take care of the tiny wound before sinking to the ground and leaning his head against the shelf. What was happening to his mind? Why was he like this? Why did he want to hurt himself? The running footstep echoed through the halls and reached his ear through the half-open kitchen door. Dew reached for the top of the shelf and pulled himself up, putting too much pressure on his fingers, which ended up soaking the cloth full in an instant. The door was rapidly pushed open and banged against the wall. Sorry, I didn't think she'd take that much time," Avery gasped out of breath, leaning against the doorframe for a moment before closing off the room and pacing towards him. "Did you run all the way here?" Dew questioned. He hid his hand behind his back to keep his partner from getting any stupid ideas. Avery nodded. "Almost. We sped back after we noticed you were gone, and I dropped her off at her room, and Patricia is in charge now. I'm glad nothing happened to you on your way." "Did you have fun?" Dew couldn't hide the bitterness from his opposite. The face changed from nothing but exhaustion and relief to one of guilty understanding. "It was fine, I guess. I just wished she hadn't convinced her father, because I would have preferred you to be my partner," Avery admitted, hands opening towards him. Dew closed his eyes and turned around, picking up the knife and towel to clean it from the blood. "You know I can't dance," he commented as a lazy excuse to himself. Immediately a pair of arms wrapped around him from behind, like the night before, and the knight groaned. "That wouldn't have mattered. Do you think half of the people knew a thing about dancing in a certain style? I only picked it up because the princess requested me to join her because she had no one. Dew chuckled dryly. Could have asked me. He didn't mean it. He would have denied if the proposal had been made, and the idea of getting into physical contact with a person he didn't consider a close familiar felt wrong. With someone she considers to be a man? Never. Her social status doesn't allow it, especially not because she's engaged. She sees me as a woman, but not feminine enough to cause suspicion in public, you see? Avery explained out of breath, diminishing the space between their heads. Dew's hand went to reach for her horns and felt them right above his ears. You do make an astonishing man, I must say. There's nothing more I wish for. Avery went to get Dew's hands from the horns and closed his lips around the tips of the pale fingers. Dew felt a slight sting followed by the usual cool sensation signaling his wound to have been healed. How do you want to spend the rest of the night, Fishy? I would do anything, he whispered while he went on to kiss the inside of Dew's wrist. Anything? He repeated, leaning further into the person behind him. Yes, I'm determined to return, but who knows? I would be delighted to part with something for your pleasure. Dew turned around without freeing his wrist from the other one's grip and went to sling his arms around the waist of the belt, which kept the light brown chemise in place. The black hair fell loosely over the hybrid's shoulders. In the embrace he felt protected. Then I have a request, the shorter one said, his gaze fixed on the knot of the shirt on Avery's collar, so the dull eyes couldn't irritate his mind. Teach me a couple of steps. Dew didn't see him, but he just knew he was smiling. It was a clear, starry night outside the window of their room. The soft light reflected from the surface of the few new armor pieces which laid on the table, together with a packed bag containing little belongings. Dew could barely see any of them through the pillows, blankets, and capes keeping them warm. Their fingers had stayed crossed throughout the last 2 hours of vague instructions, clumsy movements, and Avery's amused laughter whenever his partner stepped on the sturdy brown boots by missing a step. Now Dew found himself laying down as he was, with one hand holding him and the other one on the hair and horns next to his own head. He felt the dragon's breath near his ear, a sign of Avery's ongoing existence and reassurance of his presence. It had taken the Merling several tries to feel comfortable being locked under someone else's body again, barely able to move or even breathe deeply. Even more did he have to allow himself to relax while his partner's hands had dug through the layers of his shirts to caress his skin or kiss Dew's neck, collar, and arms. But he insisted on staying like this. He didn't want the soldier to feel any more pressure on his wound than he already did, and then there was the strange kind of heat which spread throughout Dew's chest in the position. He couldn't explain what it was, but it kept him warm and kept him comfortable. Dew shut his eyes closed, sinking deeper into the exhaustion he felt after the long day. He couldn't grasp a single thought. The image of Josephine wailing popped into his head, but was immediately pushed away by the bobcat enjoying being treated like a house cat. Then he saw Alba dancing with Avery, but it followed the scene of him looking over Avery's shoulder while being led in circles. Afterwards appeared the memory of Frederick apologizing for everything he ever did. It didn't stay long until the vivid scene of leaning into kisses on his neck took over Dew's entire awareness and guided him into the deep fog of sleep. It was as if part of him was cut off, empty, blank, a limb which had been amputated and left phantom pain where it used to be. Dew woke up from a dreamless sleep and found himself alone. The blankets were tightly tucked around him so he did not shiver, but a spot on his forehead was wet. His eyes fluttered open. Ignoring the immediate dizziness of jumping up, he rushed towards the window while a quiet clattering came from the floor before the bed, but he was greeted by nothing but the bright white outside. Almost falling over, Dew tore the door open, and his feet, wearing nothing but socks, sent him down the stairs as if he was flying. 1 floor below, he rushed towards the nearest accessible window towards the patio and pressed his face against the freezing glass to look downwards. There was no one. The fresh snow had been trampled and dirtied by hundreds of feet, but only a lonely crow hopped from one end to the other in the search of crumbs for it to eat. In his room again, Dew sank to the floor. The spinning of his head took over and forced him to bury his face in his arms until it calmed down. He didn't even get to say goodbye. Dew's fist slammed against the wooden floor. He didn't even get to see him one last time. His fingers touched something next to him. Maybe nails standing out after all those years of use, or a different kind of metal scrap. He pulled on it, and it let itself be picked up without resistance. The tips of his fingers felt the smooth, cold surface of the tiny object. It felt familiar. Dew glanced to the side to look at what he held in his palm. His eyes widened for a moment before they were drowned in tears, which made his world blur. A golden ring looked back at him.